And joining us now, the aforementioned Brad Duguid, Ontario's new Minister of Economic Development and Innovation and the MPP for Scarborough Centre. Welcome back to TVO.
Well, it's great to be back, and it's great to be back in the legislature again.
Well, I'm always curious about this. How'd you get the call?
Well, it's interesting. I was sitting in a parking lot. My son was at hockey practice last night, waiting by my BlackBerry, checking it about every 10 minutes to make sure it was still working.
10 minutes or 10 seconds?
Well, pretty much constantly. And, I got to tell you, it doesn't matter how long you've been in cabinet or where you're at. It is a very anxious time because you're very curious to know what your next responsibility is going to be.
So you literally found out last night?
Like all cabinet ministers, other than the Minister of Finance, who was advised earlier, right. We all found out last night.
You got a phone call?
Just before you would have found out.
You got a phone call?
A phone call from the Premier.
From him himself?
Him himself.
And what does he say?
A little bit of small talk, and then it may be different for each minister. He lets you know, where you're going to be going, what your responsibilities are going to be, what the expectations are. And then you move on and talk to some staff about the logistics of what the swearing-in is going to be.
And then they leak it to the media. And
then they, well, it's not a leak when you put out a press release.
Oh, I see.
That's a press release.
What was your reaction when he told you?
Very, very happy. Number one, very happy to be back in cabinet, privileged to be back in cabinet, privileged to be part of a portfolio, economic development and innovation, that's going to be a very important part of our priorities to create jobs and build a strong economy.
Do you get a choice? In other words, do you ever say to any of him or his people, boy, I'd sure, if you're shuffling, I'd sure love this?
I can't speak for other ministers. I can tell you my approach has been to let the Premier decide, and you'll either get the call or you won't get the call.
What do you understand your new job to be?
Well, I think really what it's about is continuing to build a strong economy. We have some really good fundamentals here in Ontario, one of the strongest workforces, one of the most talented and educated workforces in the world. We have good infrastructure here. We have a tax system that's seen as very, very competitive internationally. It's a good place to invest. We have a good record over the last number of years of getting investment in. So my job will be to ensure that we continue to get investment into Ontario, continue to create jobs, and continue to build this green, clean energy economy that we've begun to build here in this province.
Which you promoted a great deal when you were in your last portfolio, the Energy Ministry. Okay, half of your portfolio is innovation, a relatively new ministry. And I wonder, so far, I know you've had the job for, where are we here, 8:06, so you've had the job for a few hours. How innovative do you think the Ontario workforce is?
Well, I would say that we're not innovative enough. We've done well in Ontario. When you look at some of the areas we're excelling in, innovation has been a big part of that. But I think in the new economy, in the new global economy, innovation is critical. And that's why I'm really enthused about the fact that the Premier has seen the synergy between innovation and economic development and jobs. So it's going to be a major priority for us.
Have you had a briefing yet?
Not yet.
Not a one? Really?
Well, no. We've been through the swearing-in. We've been through the reception at the Lieutenant Governor's room at the legislature, and now I'm on your show. So it all happens pretty fast, Steve.
Okay. You just mentioned a second ago we're not innovative enough in some areas in our economy. Like what?
Well, we've got to continue to strive to be one of the most innovative jurisdictions in the world. We've done really well in clean energy, for instance. And there are other areas in the energy field where innovation's taking place. In our health sector, there's some great innovation going on. We want to be innovators when it comes to developing and building the electric car. We see that as the way of the future, the jobs of tomorrow. So innovation is critical, and as I said, it'll go hand in hand with our ability to attract investment and create jobs for us today, but just as importantly for our kids tomorrow.
You may have missed this earlier this week because you weren't the Minister of Innovation yet and therefore maybe not as attuned to this, but a federally appointed panel looking at research and development in Canada concluded, according to the Globe, that, quote, Ottawa needs to overhaul its R&D program because it spends too much money and fails to show any increase in innovation among Canadian companies. Does that sound about right to you?
Well, I mean, it's far too soon for me to prognosticate on policy issues before I've even had a briefing in the ministry. But what I would say is that we will relentlessly pursue innovation. It's something that's near and dear to the Premier's heart. He recognizes that innovation, the power of a good idea, is probably more powerful than anything in building a strong economy. And we've got examples of that here in Ontario. And while they're going through some challenges now, BlackBerry is a great example of that. Great innovation that we've seen. And think of the thousands of jobs that have been created by that. We need to repeat that over and over again here in Ontario.
I bet you were cursing Jim and Mike last week, though, when your BlackBerry went down for a day and a half.
Actually, yes. mine seemed to miraculously survive. I'm not quite sure how.
I don't know how that happened either. Here's, I mean, it's a little bit of a smart-ass question, but let's try it anyway. Are you glad to be out of the energy portfolio, honestly?
I honestly love that portfolio. It's a tough portfolio.
Exactly.
It is day to day, hour to hour, tons of moving parts. At any moment in time, there could be issues arise. There usually are. So it's a very challenging portfolio, but you like to be where the action is. I think Chris Bentley's going to do a marvelous job there. You have to be on your toes at all times in the Ministry of Energy, and I think he'll do a really good job at it.
Well, one of the reasons I ask you is that it is conventional wisdom around Queen's Park that basically 3 of the 4 cabinet ministers who lost on election night did so because the Green Energy Act was not popular in rural Ontario, and you basically lost almost all your rural seats because of it. And you were kind of, that's your file, sir. So, again, are you happy to see that in the rearview mirror?
Well, I think if you look right across the province, though, I mean, we're back with a very strong mandate. We're back with
you got a mandate. It's not
with
very
a
strong.
Major minority, one seat short of a majority. It's a third term. That doesn't happen too often. And part of the reason we're back is we've worked very hard to build a strong, clean energy economy. We've worked very hard to turn around the energy system that we inherited. And I think over time, Ontario families recognize that this was tough to do. It was a hard thing to do, but it was necessary and important to build a strong economy and to move our energy system forward.
But everybody's saying it. Part of the reason you're not back with a third consecutive majority is because of energy. Rural Ontario didn't buy in. That's fair to say, isn't it?
Well, I'm not so sure that it is. I think that there are a lot of issues in campaigns, and certainly this is one of them that was out there. At the same time, had we not have moved forward with our clean energy economy, we wouldn't have a world-leading clean energy industry here. We wouldn't have 20,000 jobs that we've created, 50,000 by the end of next year. We probably wouldn't be 94% out of dirty coal. Those are things that do resonate with Ontario families right across the province. So I think overall, the response to everything that the government did was to re-elect us. And at the end of the day, that's re-electing us with a mandate to continue to work hard in these areas.
Okay, but you're a 416 minister, so, let me put it this way. The knock on your government is, if you live in Oakville or you live in Mississauga and you make a stink about a gas-fired plant and you're going in your backyard, you guys will shut it down. If you're out in rural Ontario and you don't like the windmills, suck it up. They're staying. Now, that's the impression. What do you think of that impression?
I don't think it's a fair impression. I think that's an impression that someone would try to put forward if they were trying to divide Ontarians through urban and rural geography. And I don't think that's a fair way to look at it. Our government does listen to communities. We do look at the things that we're moving forward on. But the fact is, building a clean, reliable, modern energy system is not easy. It does require tough decisions. And building a world-leading clean energy economy and creating jobs takes effort.
But just again, going on this urban-rural split, I guess people watching us in rural Ontario tonight will want to know that the new Minister of Economic Development and Innovation, when he flies all over the world looking for business for Ontario, is not only out there saying, come to the Greater Toronto Area. We got other places in the province as well. Is that part of your mandate?
We've got an enormous amount of potential throughout this province when it comes to economic development opportunities. I mean, the Ring of Fire is probably a great example of that. That's going to create thousands of jobs for Ontario. It's going to create billions of dollars of investment in this province. So the investment opportunities are not just conducive to Toronto or the GTA. We've got to build a strong economy right across Ontario, and we're absolutely focused on doing that.
Okay, let me ask you a couple of more things in our last couple of minutes here, and that is, people who've had your job in the past fly all over the world to drum up business for this province. But people who've had your job in the past, at least not in, when was the last time? 1985 to 87 was the last time we had a minority parliament in Ontario. Your vote matters a lot more today than it did before. You know, you could have a bunch of ministers flying around and it wouldn't bring the government down. It might now. Will that affect your ability to get on a plane and go somewhere to do your job?
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that we'll see how it goes. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. Ministers are going to have to be closer to Queen's Park when the House is sitting. Now, the House isn't always sitting. So when the House isn't sitting, you will have the ability to go out to other parts of the world. But our priority will be to create jobs, and we will do whatever we need to do that. And if I have to be a little closer to home in getting that job done, we'll find ways to get it done.
You've seen your predecessors in this job, so you know where the job takes you. Where do you want to go first?
I haven't set out a travel plan or anything like that at this point in time. Our priority, the first place I'm going to go, frankly, when it comes to getting advice, will be our own domestic business community. One thing I've learned in this business is government doesn't know it all. The place where I'll go for guidance in terms of where this province should go in building our economy will be our business community, our business leaders. I've always had a good relationship with them through all my years in this business. And I'll be reaching out to them to say, how can we work together to build a stronger economy? That'll be my first place to go.
You mentioned earlier you thought your successor in energy, Chris Bentley, will make a good energy minister. And I want to know if he calls you, and there's no guarantee he will, but if he calls you up and he says, Brad, okay, it's my headache now. Give me some advice so I can do this job well. What would you tell him?
Well, one of my advantages was having a fantastic staff team. You really need that. It is a very demanding industry, and so you need a good staff team. You need to be on your toes at all times. You need to be able to take criticism because it's a very large sector, and you cannot make everybody happy. But you need to always keep the public interest first and foremost, and I think that's what we've managed to do. We've made some tough decisions in energy. But we've been able to build a clean, reliable, modern energy system, something that previous governments to us were not able to do.
Keep the CEO of Samsung on speed dial? Would that be part of it?
Well, Samsung's investing a lot of billions of dollars into our province and creating thousands of jobs. We need to make sure that we continue to build those projects.
Brad Duguid, we're grateful that you could spare some time for us. Maybe your first interview as the new Minister of Economic Development and Innovation, and we're glad it was here at TVO.
Not maybe, it absolutely was, Steve, and it's a pleasure.
Thanks so much.